How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel, Make Money Trucking. So I was going to give a quick update. I am currently sitting in my 2011 Freightliner Coronado and my 122 SD. And I know I made a video about how this truck, it cost me the most money any truck has ever cost me in the last 10 years I've been doing this. And I just wanted to give you an update on how things are going. You know, since I did end up spending, what was the tally? Closer to $40,000 or $50,000 on this truck in the last, year to 2.5 years. So, long story short, good thing. And if you guys don't remember what happened, basically this truck went down. The first time it went down with the injector, I ended up replacing the injector, and then I later found out the turbo had basically almost, grenaded my motor and come apart. And then I replaced the turbo, and then the exhaust manifold had a crack in it. So fast forward a few months later, this might have been 6 months to a year later, truck was going haywire, dash was going haywire. So I ended up, taking the truck to a shop where it wasn't the right shop to take it to. That's on me. It's kind of one step forward, two steps backwards. Basically, I wish some shops would be kind of honest about their abilities. Nothing against a shop that only knows how to do, if you only know how to do, brakes, tires, a starter, an alternator, then kind of be honest with your customer. If you guys don't know how to do, heavy diagnostics on, a Detroit, platform, you should be honest with your customer. And then, anyway, so I took it in there, found out that there's a bunch of coolant in the fuel. So we did injector cups, and yet this truck came from Canada, so it doesn't have fuel bowls because I think they freeze and crack and break and shatter. So there wasn't really a good way I could tell there's fuel getting into the there's coolant getting into the fuel system until I started dropping injectors. So I replaced another set of injectors. They're under warranty, and then we did the injector cups, and then we cleaned out the fuel system the best we could. I got the truck back, and I don't remember if it ran for a couple weeks, and then it just started, going haywire again. No throttle response, intermittent throttle response, just kind of just going haywire when you just know, oh shit, something's like really, really wrong, like communication, ECM, that kind of stuff, where a gauge started going, all over the place. So I ended up taking it to, this would be the second or third shop. I think it was the second shop at the time, and said, hey, look, guys, they did some work for me prior, and they treated me pretty well. So at the time, I was kind of, you're kind of ignorant to the fact that, if you've been treated 2 times pretty decently at a shop, you take it back. Well, this is a time where, the shop royally tried to screw me, and, they had estimated that, about a $15,000 repair bill turned into them trying to hold my truck hostage for a like $35,000 repair bill. So, the estimate was $15,000, and then a couple months go by and I get an invoice for $30-something thousand, over double what our initial invoice quote had been. So anyways, while I was there, we had to replace another turbo because it cracked, another exhaust manifold because it overheated. They did injectors again. They replaced the what was it, the fuel filter, I think the fuel filter housing, they updated that to a 2-piece, and then they replaced the oil filter reservoir housing / cooler. I don't know exactly what it does, but the things just start puking oil out the bottom of them, and it's the gasket on the backside. And they probably lied to me, but they said that they can't just replace the gas on the backside. It's kind of sold as whole, it's kind of BS. But at the time, when you're $10,000-$15,000 deep into this segment of a repair cost, you're kind of ready for that. So you're like, okay, well, another $1,000 just get the whole system put on there, it's new, whatever. You're kind of like, this is my livelihood, so take care of the truck, get it replaced. So long story short, couple turbos, couple exhaust manifolds, oil filter housing, fuel filter housing, injectors, you know, probably 2 or 3 times, 2 turbos, 2 exhaust manifolds. And they found that the culprit of a lot of these injector failures and the exhaust manifolds overheating was due to the fact that they kept looking. So it was having a fueling issue, or I don't know if it was starving for fuel or overfueling. So it was basically just making the components get really hot, and it was like heating and cracking the exhaust manifold and the turbo. So from what they explained to me is that they kept going from the fuel system forward, like from the fuel tank forward. But the problem was actually at the fuel tank itself. So the feed line that came out of the fuel tank actually had a ball valve in it. And I don't know if it was because it's a Canadian truck, they have like a safety shutoff for like a ball valve, but that ball valve either was broken or it was causing the restriction of inadequate fuel flow. So basically, and this is all, I'm not, you know, a master mechanic by any means. I'm just trying to explain it the way they explain it to me, is that kind of like how you have Venturi effect on like a carburetor, where you have air fuel mixture. Well, with the fuel flow going into the system, you have to have adequate fuel flow. So I guess essentially with this ball valve is either starving for fuel or getting too much fuel. There wasn't an abundant, reliable fuel volume source at all times to basically, you know, direct the fuel as the system needed or wanted to. So that's why stuff was getting super hot. And, you know, at the time I did not have an EGT gauge. So then I actually got an EGT gauge installed. So right there is my EGT gauge. We had installed one, and obviously I didn't know if I was just getting the truck way too hot, because, you know, we do haul like 115,000 pounds. We haul pretty heavy. So I'm like, well, and this is a DD15, but it can be turned up to the 560 mark from the factory. They're kind of rare. There's not a whole lot of them that can do that, but it is like a factory 560 horsepower DD15. So I didn't know if I was just getting beaten on it way too hard, but, you know, I mean, the truck will get hot and the engine fan does come on. So I don't know if I was just melting the freaking, you know, the motor down all the time and melting turbos and exhaust manifolds. But ever since we had this all fixed, I watched an EGT gauge like a hawk, and it hasn't gone above 900. Like, very rarely does it go above 900. At about 850 to 870, I start backing off on it. And then I've actually got on it a few times just to see, and it really hasn't gone above that 900. So I think we solved the problem. So anyways, this is like a 6 months, between 6 months and a yearly update. So far, so good. The truck definitely wasn't worth, I mean, the truck was pretty much paid off at this point. So, you know, the truck's maybe worth $50,000, $40,000 to, like, you know, on like a fair market value. So was the truck worth the $40,000 to $50,000 I had to put into it the last couple years? Well, not really, but, you know, it is making me money, and so far so good. You know, there's always little things on trucks you're gonna have to deal with, but yeah. So my 2011 Freightliner, my 6 months, 1 year update after I spent all this money on it, it's been okay. It's been fine. You know, there's been some little things here and there, but there's always going to be like starters, alternators, belts, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, pretty much everything on this truck has been replaced except for internally. And a lot of the diesel truck repair channels out there, you know, they claim that these motors are good for, you know, 1 million miles. It's just everything around them is junk and garbage. And honestly, I can agree, because I pretty much place everything around the motor. You know, we've done absolutely everything. You know, air compressor, the oil separator thing, a breather, injectors. I mean, I've done everything except for internal to the motor, pretty much. You know, starter, alternator, oil separator, fuel filter housing. I think a fuel pump is in there somewhere. So yeah, it's been good so far. I hate that I spent this much money on the truck and it didn't include an in-frame, but I mean, this stuff's expensive. You know, I make videos about that all the time, about how, you know, the price of stuff has gone up double or triple in the last couple years. So maybe, but if this was pre-pandemic, I bet you this $50,000 I spent would have been, I mean, the parts alone was, let's just say the parts were $25,000 to $30,000. I bet you I would have saved upwards of $15,000. So my $50,000 I spent would probably only be about $35,000 if this is pre, pandemic times. But ever since, COVID and all that crap, everything's just gone through the roof, and people won't lower their prices because they've gotten high on their own supply of making, $200 an hour and, charging double for their parts. So, until a system crashes, they're not going to lower their prices, unfortunately. So they're just going to ride that ship until we all crash, and then we're all kind of screwed. But yeah, that's just another rant. I'll get off, my soapbox on that. But yeah, that is the current situation on my 2011 Freightliner Coronado. It's been a good truck. Now I'm kind of out of it a little bit more nowadays. So it's nice. I got, see behind me, it's got the bigger sleeper, or my other truck's got smaller sleepers, or just a bed in the back. So this is nice. This one has the room. I wish I had that big DD16 like my other trucks have, but it's all right. The DD15 does the job. This thing's got everything I could need, for what I do. But yeah, so maybe I'll keep it. Maybe I'll keep this truck as a spare, get rid of the other one, get something else. But I guess all I need now is this is another thing I want to ask you guys. You guys tell me your experience with this. At some point, this truck's got, let's see, 650,000 miles on it. I bought it with 400,000. So, and yes, it's been the most expensive truck. It's okay. This is kind of funny. This is one of the cheapest trucks I ever bought. I bought this truck during the shutdowns and everybody's freaked out. I bought it out of Canada. For no joke, I bought this truck for $26,000. It's probably one of the cheapest trucks I ever bought. And for 2 years, it's been really good to me. So that was good. And then, the next couple years were kind of, learning stuff. And some of that stuff's on me. I'm not 100% familiar with these DD15 and 16 platform. My bread and butter was always the Detroit 60 series. I owned a lot of those before. That's where I cut my teeth. I knew a lot more about those. And plus, those trucks are easier to diagnose. Usually when you have a problem, there's only one or two solutions. With the DD15, the newer stuff, there could be a couple more causes to a problem that aren't just so cut and dry. So with that being said, lost train of thought there. So some of those problems I maybe should have known. Like when my fuel injector cup started to go, that probably cost me a set of injectors I didn't need to replace, because I could have seen the signs of that. I kept getting a water and fuel light, but I was on the East Coast, so I didn't know if I was getting crappy fuel. So I put like Hows in there, and it would kind of fix the problem temporarily, or at least the light on the dash that shows you got water in your fuel would go away. But now that I think about that, and then it started running really rough, like the idle was a little bit rough, and it just kind of felt like it just wasn't idling right. But it was still running, but it was just idling just a little bit rougher. And that was probably due to the injector cups getting the coolant into the fuel. So, there's a learning curve with all platforms, right? I've had these platforms for, a little over 5 or 6 years now, so I'm kind of getting used to it. But so some of this problems was due to my own ignorance of just not knowing the DD15 and 16 platform, as well as the Detroit 60 series. And then also, a little bit this is like a Canadian spec truck, so there's a little bit different stuff. Like there's no fuel filter, like a Davco, like a fuel water separator filter on this truck. They're just not a glass bowl. So maybe having that could have prevented that as well. I would have seen the coolant getting in the fuel. And then that fuel ball valve on the feed line coming out of the fuel tank. I don't know if anybody could have stopped that, because even the shops I took to, I talked to, were like, yeah, that's new one for me. And the problem is this took like 15 to 20 hours of diag alone. That's where a lot of my bill jumped up so high, is because everybody kept going like farther down the system, not up the system, which up the system mean like to the fuel tank. They kept going down the system, the fuel pump, the fuel filter, the fuel lines, the injectors. They kept going down the stream, and they couldn't figure out what was causing it. So finally, a mechanic by luck or, you know, by his, you know, skill and wisdom, looked at the fuel feed line. But anyways, aside from that, the question I want to ask you guys is, everything's been done on this truck aside from the actual internal to the motor, and I've heard these trucks are good for $1 million. We'll see, since everything else has been replaced now. Do you guys think buying a long block is a better route, or just doing an in-frame? So just buying a long block and getting that swapped out, or actually just paying to, you know, take apart this motor and do an in-frame on it? So you guys let me know of your experiences with just replacing the long block. And there's like 3 different stages. Like, you can just get the bare long block. I think it's just a block in the head and internals, and that's like 20,000. It's like 20,000, then it steps up to like 25,000 for, you know, I think maybe that includes like the exhaust manifold and the turbo, and then a couple other components, and then like you said, it's like the 30,000. That's almost like everything, like the drive assembly, water pump, fuel pump. Like it's pretty much like dropping a whole new motor assembly in. So you guys let me know on your experience with that, because I don't have any experience with that. Most of my experience is just, you know, when guys do in-frames and just rebuilding what's already there, and that might be a better route for me because everything else has been replaced already. But if I do just get a long block, and they just take out the old, you know, motor, and also the labor differential. So they charge a lot for, it seems like they charge a lot to do an in-frame, but because you're paying for the labor for them to rebuild your motor, but then you're not paying for the labor for them to dismantle everything off of your motor, take your motor out, and then put a new motor in. So I kind of feel like it might be a wash, whichever way you go, because to do the in-frame, you're paying for someone to rebuild your motor, so you're paying that labor charge, but then you're not paying for all the stuff to be ripped off the motor and the motor pulled out and put back in. But with replacing a long block, you're not paying for them to do, you know, rebuild your motor, but then you're paying for the disassembly and reassembly process of everything else around your motor. And that is kind of scary to me, because I don't know, man. My luck is when I get when I don't do the work myself in my truck, or have a really good shop that I know, or a really reputable person I know do something, it seems like there's always stuff that they miss, you know. Oh, sorry, we didn't plug this in, or we didn't tighten this down, and, you know, I'm chasing out problems the next couple months of, like, you know, something's going haywire and I don't know why, and the next thing I know, you know, they didn't tighten something up because they had to dismantle everything out from the motor and then put it back all together. You guys let me know on what you guys have had better luck with, doing a long block or just getting an in-frame, because I like the in-frame, but it's just like the prices are like I keep hearing quotes around 30 to 35,000 for an in-frame, but what I like about that is they're not touching anything around the motors. They're not trying to dismantle everything and just doing internal motor work, and you're good to go. Whereas, you know, the long block, dismantling and putting back together all that stuff kind of scares me, because it seems like, you know, my rant about prices, quality has not gotten any better. You know, the guys who work on your truck, they don't care. They're probably less experienced than they ever have been in the last 10 years of this industry. And yeah, so it just scares me putting my trust into a shop to dismantle everything off my motor, take that motor out, put a new motor back in, and then hope they got everything hooked up right. Because, you know, they like I said, the workmanship, the responsibility is just not there anymore. They don't care anymore. You know, these shops just don't have good, qualified, ethical, you know, people working for them that, you know, care like they used to. So, but anyways, it's kind of a longer video. That's kind of the update of my 2011 Freightliner Coronado, and, you know, what's next for this truck. Pretty much just getting that motor replaced, you know, in the next, I'm doing the next 100 to 200,000 miles, and then pretty much at that point I'll have almost a brand new truck that nothing's not been touched on this thing, on, you know, under the hood wise. But all right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.